Why would God ever ask someone to kill their own child? As Christians in this century, of course, we have fought against things like abortion, things like murder, things like homicide, obviously over and over and over again. This is a horrible thing. So why would God ever ask Abraham to do this? Well, he did. And there's a lot of things that we can talk about why this happened or why God asked him to do this. But in the end, he is God and he has the right to give and to take away, right? As we see in the Bible. But here we're going to talk about this whole story of Isaac, not only the sacrifice, but also his marriage later on in life. There are a lot of really amazing things that come with the son of Abraham, Isaac, who is the father of Israel. And so we're going to dive into this as well. This starts in Genesis chapter 22, if you want to join along with us, but here it is right on the screen. Let's start to read through some of this, and then we're going to talk through exactly why Isaac is so significant and why God would ask these specific things. Starting in verse 1 of Genesis chapter 22, we see, after all these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac." Now, this is really interesting, right? Because previously, when we talked about Abraham, we know that Abraham had another son with Hagar, the servant of Sarai, Sarah. So we know that Abraham had another son, but yet God here says, "Take your only son, Isaac." This is very telling as to where God was thinking during this, right? He's not including Ishmael in the line of Abraham anymore. He's saying that Isaac is his only son. That is extremely important because God did not choose Ishmael. He chose Isaac. So let's keep that in mind. He says, "Take your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." Now, this is really important which mountain he's talking about too. We're going to make that connection in just a bit. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. So he takes all of his stuff and he's going to this location specifically. Now let's skip down to verse 5. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." Now this version, I'm in ESV here. You can read this in different translations, but in order to get a better understanding, let me kind of show you what's happening here. Abraham literally looks to the two guys that he brought with him, and he says, "Hey, you're gonna stay here with the donkey. Me and my son are gonna go up here. We're gonna worship, and then we're gonna come back down." And so this is showing us, it's foretelling to us that Abraham already understood that something was gonna happen here, that he was not actually going to go kill his son. Now, some people could say that Abraham was like lying here, but there's evidence elsewhere in the Bible that would show that that's not the case, okay? He truly believed that him and Isaac were going to come back down and rejoin the group to go back home. So Abraham took the burnt offering and the wood. He laid Isaac on the wood, and he raises his knife, and he's about to kill Isaac, okay? He packs up all the stuff. They're ready to go. And Isaac asks him a question. Okay. Isaac says, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, son." And he said, "Behold the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" So Isaac, a lot of people will say that Isaac is like a young boy here, but genuinely a lot of people believe that Isaac was most likely in his late teens to early 20s. He was probably a younger man at this point. And so he is realizing, hey, there's something missing here. Normally when we do sacrifices, we have a lamb for the burnt offering, but we don't have that this time. Where is it? What do we do? Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So they went, both of them, together. Okay. So they continue on, and Abraham is about to kill his son. He is about to do what God has asked him to do. And so Abraham reached out his hand. He took the knife to slaughter his son. But then, right here, verse 11, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Again, with that your only son portion, really, really important. So we're seeing that God stops Abraham from killing Isaac here. And this is an intense moment, right? Abraham is willing to do whatever God wanted to do. Within this whole conversation, as Abraham is about to kill Isaac and going through this as well, there is obviously a point in which Abraham understands who God is, okay? So at no point does Abraham actually think that he's going to kill his son and his son will be dead. Even though he is obedient to God and he's following through with this, he also understands the character of God. The character of God is someone who is different than the pagan gods. In the context of this time, the pagan gods would lead these people into killing their children all the time. There's literally there's a god who would have a metal body, a giant statue basically that was formed, and they would burn wood to make this statue burning hot, this large metal statue. And then they would throw their children into this, and they would play drums so loudly in order to drown out the screams of the children. Horrible. God isn't like that. He makes that very clear in a lot of the things that he talks about. And so in this example, when he's talking to Abraham and he's asking him to do this, Abraham understands that God is not the God of the pagans. God is not just like these other little g gods, right? He is different. Yahweh is different. And so in this, we actually see proof of this in another book of the Bible, in Hebrews. So let's look at this. In Hebrews chapter 11, we don't know who the author of Hebrews was, but we know that they were a big figure in the early church and that they held a lot of sway within the community there. And so obviously this book is in Scripture. We take it as inerrant and we take it as Scripture, right? We see here in verse 17, chapter 11 of Hebrews, by faith Abraham was, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son. Again, reiterating that his only son moment. Verse 18, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named, he considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. So this puts us in the frame of mind for Abraham. Even though this is written way, way later in time, this allows us to see into the mind state that Abraham had for this moment. And so we're seeing through the author of Hebrews that Abraham actually had a mindset of, even if God has me do this and I kill my son right here, he will bring him back from death for me. Because he has promised me through Isaac will come many nations. He has promised me through this offspring that my offspring will number the sands on the beach, right? It will number the stars in the sky. So Abraham knew that he could trust that promise of God because he had seen God do things over and over and over again within the promises that he had made him. So this is why we understand why Abraham did what he did and why God asked him to do that in the first place. There's context that's around it. But regardless of all of that, God is still God. And even if we think that this is a wrong thing, why would we even think that it's a wrong thing? Do you believe in universal morality? Because if you do, then you would have to believe in God and understand that this is his to give and take away. We're probably not going to get into that in this video, but maybe we can talk about that another time. And to put some context to this as well, in that time, during Abraham's time, it was normal for other gods to have people kill their firstborn child. It was a ritual that happened all the time in different areas for different reasons, and it was a very prevalent thing in the pagan world. However, God wanted to do things differently. And so testing Abraham here as a part of that was seeing how he would obey God, even in the things that were so severe. And so God brought him to this place. He provided a ram for him that was caught in a thicket nearby. And then they sacrificed that ram to God on Mount Moriah. Now, this is extremely important, the location of where this is happening, because Mount Moriah eventually becomes the location of the temple that Solomon builds. It's the location in which David builds his city of David. It's the location in which everything important happens in Christianity. It's where Jesus is going to return to at the end. This blows my mind that God, from the very beginning, we're just in the first chapters of Genesis here, and God is already forming this narrative that he's going to play throughout all the rest of the Bible. Mount Moriah is extremely significant. So we see as Abraham is about to kill Isaac, Isaac is spared, and then God begins to use Isaac throughout his life. Now, we're not going to talk about every single facet of everything that Isaac goes through here, but we are going to talk about his marriage, which is another interesting piece where we see God working under the underneath all the narrative here as well. So let's jump into this. We're going to skip chapter 23. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 24. If you're liking this video so far, the best way that you can support us is through Patreon, $5, $10, or $25 a month, and you can help us to continue to make content just like this. Even when YouTube is being weird or monetization is on and off and all that kind of stuff, it would really help us out if you supported us over there. So if you want to join our inner circle and get extra content and full live streams, then go join our Patreon by hitting the link down in the description down below. And so now we're in Genesis chapter 24. And we're going to meet Isaac's wife here. So Abraham Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there." So basically, okay, let me restart here. So basically, Abraham here is trying to find a son or a wife for Isaac. This is really important because Isaac, of course, needs to have offspring if Abraham is going to fulfill the covenant and continue to have kids, more and more kids. And so Abraham is looking for a wife here for his son. So then we see earlier on, it says, "Put your hand under my thigh that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell." So right now, Abraham and his people are living amongst the Canaanites. However, he does not want to mix his bloodline with the Canaanites. And so he's really wanting to find a wife for Isaac that is not of the Canaanites. The Canaanites are an evil people. They are pagans. They are people who do not worship Yahweh. And so Abraham wants to keep his family in people that worship Yahweh, in people that understand the true God. So then we get to verse 6. Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send this angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there." So he's talking to a servant here. Now, this servant is going to be really important, okay? This servant of Abraham is tasked with basically getting a wife for Isaac. And so Abraham gives him this criteria. He says, "Hey, I need you to go find Isaac a wife, but do not bring him to a Canaanite woman. Do not bring a Canaanite woman here. We need to find someone who is in line with what we're doing, who is, who believes in the Lord," right? So here's where we really get into the meat of what we're going to talk about tonight. "Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening, and the time when women go out to draw water." So just like we see with the story later on in the Gospels where we see the woman of the well, this is a general thing that happens, right? Especially in third world countries, even today. We see that people will go out to the well during certain times of the day when it's cooler, and they will draw water in order to use for the day, right? And so we're seeing that happen here. He kneels his camels down, and it's during that specific time when the young women would come out to draw water. Then the servant begins to pray. He says, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have anointed, who you have appointed for your servant Isaac. So he's saying, God, allow me to pick the right person. The woman that comes to me after I ask for a drink and says, not only will I serve you water, but I'm also going to make sure that your camels drink as much as they need. Make that be the woman that is the one for Isaac, so that I know that it's her. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Then verse 15, before he had finished speaking, so even before he had finished this prayer, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abram's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. Now, this young woman was very attractive in appearance. She was a maiden who had known no man, so that means that she's a virgin. She went down to the spring and filled up her jar and came up, but then the servant asked her the question that he was praying about. He says, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. And she says, drink, my lord. And she quickly, let down her jar and upon her hand and gave him a drink of water. So when she had finished giving him a drink of water, she said, not only am I going to give you water, but I'll draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well. I'm sure she did this several times to make sure all the camels had the water that they need, because camels drink a lot of water, and there's a bunch of camels that are here, right, that he brought from Abraham's land. So this is really, really cool. We see as he prays for this to happen, and almost immediately it does happen. This woman comes, Rebekah, who not only gives him a drink of water, but also makes sure that all of his camels are quenched of their thirst as well. So verse 22, we pick up here. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her, arms weighing 10 gold shekels, and said, Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? So essentially, and we're going to kind of fast forward through this section here, he finds Rebekah at the spring, at the well. She fits the criteria for which he asked God to make happen, essentially. And then he begins to give her gifts, kind of showing that there is an interest there, not necessarily from him, but from his master. And so during this time, he's giving her a bunch of gifts in order for the people around her and for her to see that there's an interest that is occurring there. Basically, what happens after this is that the servant goes back to her family home, and her brothers and her family see that she is adorned with gifts, and then the servant begins to give the family gifts as well. This helps them to see, oh, this guy's serious. His master must be really interested in Rebekah. And so as they go through, there's a really interesting part that happens near the end here. And we see as the family basically is like, okay, this is really interesting. We're actually really intrigued. Maybe we could actually be okay with this. And the servant begins to retell the story of how God led him to this location. So as we can see in verse 45, before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. So he's retelling this story over the family to tell them how God had made this happen. So now we're talking about Rebekah's brother here, Laban. We see as Laban and Bethuel, which is her father or mother. I can't remember which one. I think that's her father. Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing has come from the Lord, and we cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. And so right here is where it gets kind of interesting, because Abraham's servant is like ready to go. He's like, okay, we did all the right things. We talked to all the right people. Her family says it's all good to go. And then here we see that there's kind of like a hesitation from the family that happens. So we see here, and he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they arose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. Her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that, she may go." So just like we see a lot in scripture, there are people that are hesitant to follow God or to do the things of God. And so they recognized earlier on in this passage that yes, this is something that God is asking us to do. Yes, this is something that Rebekah is supposed to go do. However, like, can she just stay with us for like 10 days? Could she just like be here with us for just a little bit longer and then you can take her? Now this may have been some sort of ploy to like steal her away and like keep all the gifts that the servant had given. It could have been just them wanting to spend more time with her. We're not exactly sure. However, it's really interesting what actually happens here. So they said, the servant says, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." So the servant is saying, no, God appointed this for the right time, at this time, for this purpose. We should follow what God has told us we should do. We should follow what God has told us is the right path. And then they say, "Let us call the young woman and ask her. Let's see what Rebekah thinks about this." And so they call Rebekah and they said to her, will you go with this man? And she immediately says, "I will go." So this shows us that Rebekah is the right person, and that not only is she the right person that God appointed at the right time and brought her to the right place to do the right actions, to tell the servant that she's the right person, but actually she has the right heart as well. That she is willing to serve God, and not only to serve him, but actually to obey him and to go with him. And so she becomes the wife of Isaac. Now we won't get into all the rest of this. We see at the very end, then Isaac, they basically meet for the first time. They instantly have eyes for each other. And then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So this is right after the death of Sarah, and he's able to start his own family right after his own mother dies. So that is Isaac. Why is Isaac important? Well, because he also has two sons. And the first son is not the one that God chooses, but the second. And that second son becomes the son that eventually becomes Israel. So we're going to talk about that next time after this episode of the Foundation series. I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, love to dive into it and talk through it with you.